You probably know from following me by now that my goal in the agency is to make things as simple as possible, both for me internally and my clients. That also extends to how I track my revenue on a monthly and annual basis. Of course, tools like QuickBooks and your accounting software are going to be extremely granular, but what I want is the ability to look at things year over year and have a super quick dashboard view of my revenue and how things are going. So what I developed was a dead simple Google Sheet that allows me to look at my services and how they're doing in terms of percentages of my top line revenue, and then also how they break down just in terms of all the things I have going on in my business. Like I said, this sheet is really simple, so you may want more data or perhaps you want less data, and that's okay. This sheet's not going to be for everyone, but this is how I do it. If you're interested, you can grab a copy of this sheet using the link in the description below, and I'll email it straight to you. So let's go ahead and take a look at the sheet. So this sheet is really simple, and of course these numbers are here for example, but the idea is that from a year over year perspective, I can look at the different aspects of my business and determine what is making the most revenue, or perhaps maybe you want to turn down a little bit on your website builds and bring up your care plans. You can look at the trend over many years. So in this example, I just have our current year of 2024 and I have last year of 2023, but in my real sheet, I typically am leaving 3 years of historic data. So we're going to have 2023, 2, and 1 now. And then of course, I'm going to come in here probably quarterly and update 2024 as sales happen and revenue actually really is flowing through the business. So the first time you set this up, it will be a little bit tedious because you do have to go, pull up your accounting software and kind of input the numbers. But for me, this is a far more effective way to do it because it's way quicker and easier to look at a tool like this than it is for someone like me to go, fumble around in QuickBooks, since I'm not my accountant and that software for me only exists for my accountant. Plus, I really love tracking these kinds of things and just having a really good handle on what's working in my business and what's not. And you can also see the trends over the years. It helps you look in one pane of glass here to see, how did my website builds do over the last 3 years? How did care plans do as a percentage of my revenue? And that really helps you assess what's working. I'm sure you're like me where you have that gut feeling and things are either going smoothly or they're going poorly, or you can look at a number and say, yeah, I made X thousands of dollars doing website builds, but I hated it, or it went really smoothly. And this helps attribute a number and a percentage to that internal feeling. I also wanted to make sure if you're a member here on the channel, you get access to videos a week early. Membership is just $5 a month. And not only, of course, do you get early access, but you also help support me, which I greatly appreciate. It allows me to continue making content like this. So please consider joining the channel. And if not, just hit that subscribe button for me. So how does this work? Well, we're going to have the year here, and that's kind of how these columns are separated. And this top line total is automatically added based on this agency total and this other projects total. So in my case, the agency side is built up, over a couple of different components here. So we're going to have care plans, website builds, hourly support, webinars, lead gen, so on and so on. Yours might be a little bit different. Maybe instead of lead gen, you do photography services or something like that. These are just text. These don't really matter. This is just for you to keep track of kind of the primary aspects of your business. Then what you're going to do is say, my care plan total for the year is, let's say, $500. Maybe in your builds, you did 1,250. Hourly support, you did, $125. And you can see as you adjust these numbers, these percentages are recalculating for you automatically, as well as the agency total and your top line total up here. So these are just really simple sum calculations here in Google Sheets. There's nothing really that crazy going on. Once you get this set up, you really don't have to touch it, which is nice. But my favorite part of this is I can look at this and I can say, okay, my top line total was $2,385. That's my agency side and my other projects like Pie Calendar, courses, and so on, maybe some affiliate revenue if you have that. And of my agency side, that made up 89% of my total revenue, which is a helpful number to know. And then from there, I'm able to say, okay, well, 23% of this 2,130 came from my care plans. So what's happening here is this is just doing the math of the care plan revenue against my agency total. This is not calculating against the top line revenue. If I click this, you can kind of see what's actually happening here. And then let's say, Pie Calendar is on track to make $5,000. Then we can say, okay, well, my courses also made, let's say, $5,000 as well. My phones made, let's say, $1,250. Then you can start to see the numbers recalculating here. So then suddenly my other projects totals to $11,000. My top line is $13,000. And then other projects make up 84% of my revenue. Agency total makes up 15%. In a case like this, I'd have to imagine that you're probably looking at this going, wait a second, my agency only makes up 16% of my revenue, but it brings in 80% of the hassle and the headache. So this is a real way for you to evaluate different aspects of your business. A more realistic total might be $25,000 worth of website builds. You might have, let's say $10,000 worth of care plans. And then we can start to say, okay, well, agency makes up 75% of my revenue. That'll also help you dictate how you spend your time. And you can look at this and say, well, my care plans make up 28% of my agency revenue. They probably take 10% of your time, whereas your builds make up 70% of your agency revenue, but they probably take up 90% of the time. So you can really evaluate things like that. Now then down here at the bottom, we have a couple of other aspects to this. So this loan section, let's say maybe you took out a PPP loan in the past or an EIDL loan in COVID here in the US, or maybe you have a loan for some other aspect of your business. You can input that number here. Then for your year-end contractor total and your payroll expenses, you can input those. So maybe you had, I don't know, $12,500 in payroll and maybe $5,000 in contractors. Then again, this actual revenue is going to be this formula here. So it's going to take your top line revenue minus loans, contractors, and payroll and leave you with that end value, which in this example is $28,000. Obviously, that's not your true net profit, but again, for me, that's totally okay. I don't need to know that number specifically. That's what QuickBooks is for. This for me is a complete enough picture from a day-to-day perspective. So with this sheet, you really don't need to modify anything in these yellow columns here or in the green column. Almost everything else is going to be automatically calculated for you. Now, if we were to go ahead and just shift click these two columns, we can go ahead and paste them over. So then you can change this to 2022. And then all of these things are going to be recalculated for you. So you can see that the math has now shifted to the F and G columns. So you can just do that really simply and then, change the background color to your preferred colors, whatever you want. Now you'll notice there's one more tab on this sheet here. So what we've been looking at is what I call year over year. And then also there's this called 2023 monthly. So this particular sheet is really basic, but I want to be able to look at a month-to-month perspective and understand how am I doing in terms of performance each month. So this is dead simple. All I do is go look at my bank statement for the month, look at the total money in, and I'm going to pop that number right in here. So let's just go ahead and delete these two. Let's say, January, you're going to have $5,000. So you're going to pop that in. Now, in terms of how this is valuable, there's this little graph right here that's going to automatically input. Let's say in February, you have a better month and you make $7,500. Then you can start to see that this graph is filling up for you, which is really nice. Now, what's happening here is it's just taking the yearly total of all of the months. And then there's a little calculation that's happening here that's just saying, take the yearly total and divide it by the number of months that have been completed. And that gives us the year-end projection. Now, this monthly average is going to automatically calculate as you add more and more months in here. So this to me is a really helpful tool to kind of see your year-end run rate if things kind of stick the way they are. But of course, if you have a banger March, let's say you make suddenly 20 grand, you have a huge project, then you can start to see our monthly average goes way up, our year-end projection goes way up. And then for me, this graph is extremely helpful for a number of reasons, but primarily because if you have huge spikes like this, you probably need to look at leveling those out a bit more just for general business stability. Or let's say then suddenly, you have a really weak April. For some reason, you only make $2,500. You can really look at this and say, okay, I got a budget or, whatever is applicable in your case. Again, this whole tool is designed to be simple and easy for you to look at a simple glance and take away the most pertinent details for you. So again, we have these two tabs, year over year and monthly. And just to reiterate, you really only need to change the values in each of these leftmost columns in your years. Then if you have other projects, go ahead and manipulate those, input any data like your loans, contractors, and payroll. And what you're going to be left with is kind of your top line net revenue before your other expenses that we're not going to take the time to calculate in this sheet. We'll leave that to QuickBooks. So again, if you want this sheet, feel free to click the link in the description below to grab it. I know this isn't going to be for everyone. If you have any questions about how I do this or why I do it a certain way, feel free to let me know. I'll answer it either in the comments or in another video in the future. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.